Hello Year 9, I hope you're all well and continuing to enjoy our lessons on Tempest. Don't forget you can pause this video at any point and just make sure before you start that you've got everything you need ready, your paper, your pens, any other booklets you want to have out in front of you before we make a start. Okay, so we've looked at a variety of different themes and characters in Tempest. Today we're going to look at the ideas of leadership and morality. So by choosing to set the Tempest on an island, Shakespeare creates a world where the rules are of course very different, and people are therefore going to behave differently from how they might behave in ordinary society. So the island setting alters ideas of conformity, which when you conform to something, it means you abide by the rules. And it also changes our ideas about leadership, about how we lead people, but also about morality, about what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. You can see 4 famous people on the screen in front of you, and you can see the question, what makes a great leader? Thinking about these 4 people here and about how they have managed to encourage people to listen to them, to follow their example in life and in history. Thinking about those 4 people, what do you think makes a great leader? Just take 2 minutes to have a little think about that. Okay, I wonder what you got. Perhaps you got some of the following ideas. Here we have 9 possible traits that a good leader might possess. Empathy, understanding how other people feel. Morality, we've already discussed that word, haven't we? Understanding, fairness, knowledge, experience, listening, flexibility and strength. Did you get any of those? Perhaps you got some other ones. Perhaps you got some better ones than that. I'd be really interested to hear what you got. Okay, so those are the qualities of a leader then. Let's think a little bit about leadership during Shakespeare's time. There were 2 monarchs on the throne when Shakespeare was alive. There was Queen Elizabeth, who reigned from 1558 to 1603, quite a long reign actually, and one of the longest reigns I think in English history. There's a little bit of information about her, and also we've got King James I. He was also King James VI of Scotland, and he reigned after Queen Elizabeth had died from 1603 to 1625. What I'd like you to do now is I'd just like you to read the information about these 2 monarchs on the screen. And I'd like you to think about these points on the right-hand side. These monarchs and Prospero all are island leaders. They've all ruled over islands and dictated what happens on them. Looking at the characteristics of Queen Elizabeth I and King James I, in what ways do you think they may have influenced Shakespeare in the creation of Prospero? Just take a couple of minutes to see if you can see any similarities or maybe any differences between Prospero, King James I and Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, so what is morality then? Let's see about this idea of morality in another island setting. I want you to watch this clip now. This is a little trailer for Bear Grylls' The Island. You may have watched it already on Channel 4. Watch the clip please, and then think about this question here. How might being stranded on an island affect your morality? Is it going to change the way you interact with other people? Is it going to change the way you see other people? Is it going to make you a better person? Is it going to bring out some negative sides of your personality? Watch the clip and then spend 2 or 3 minutes thinking about those questions, please. So throughout the play, Shakespeare deals with many moral issues, such as the treatment of Prospero, the cruelty of his revenge, and of course the captivity of both Ariel and Caliban. And morality is concerned with the principles that distinguish between right and wrong or good and bad behaviour. Morality is a really common thing throughout Shakespeare's plays, and we'll talk about a bit more about that in more detail a little bit later. But let's just have a little think about whether we are moral people. We're going to test your morality now in a little game. You don't need to do any writing here, you just need to think, you just need to have a response in your mind. I want you to imagine that you've been stranded on a desert island with a group of strangers. There are 3 scenarios to read, and I want you to think about what you would do in each of those scenarios. You don't have to tell anybody. You might want to keep it a secret, who knows? Think also about why we behave like we do. What is it that makes most of us behave more or less in a pretty good way most of the time? So read the 3 scenarios, please, and take a couple of minutes each to decide what you would do. Well, I hope that was quite insightful for you, Year 9. I hope you got a good insight into how you would behave in those particular circumstances. Now, as I said before, morality is a really important theme in Shakespeare. And there was such a thing as a morality play many, many years ago, particularly in the medieval times, during the 15th and 16th centuries, a little later than medieval, we had this idea of the morality play. And it was often linked to religion, and Shakespeare very much would have been aware of the tradition of the morality plays. And basically these were allegorical dramas where they had people representing certain emotions, certain qualities. They were often performed in the streets, in marketplaces, and as I've said, they used characters who personified moral qualities. So there would be a character called Charity, a character called Vice, or there would be characters based on death or youth, and they would embody them, they would personify them, and they would teach people how they thought they should behave through these characters. They were a little bit like fables, like Aesop's fables. They were telling people how to live better lives. So obviously that was in the back of Shakespeare's mind when he was writing a lot of his plays. He'd seen probably some of these. They travelled around the country. No doubt he stumbled across them in Stratford, in his hometown. No doubt he stumbled across them in London. Do we have an equivalent of the morality plays in the 21st century? Look at the images on the next slide, and I want you to think creatively. Choose one and complete the sentence. The following image is an equivalent of a medieval morality play because... I'm going to give you 5 or 6 minutes just to think about how one of these could be interpreted as like a morality play. And I just want you to jot down the end of that sentence, explaining and justifying your choice. Okay, so as I've said, Shakespeare is full of questions of morality. You're now going to hear 3 pretty tough decisions based on Shakespeare plays, but you get to be the judge. We've got 3 plays here, 3 summaries. I want you to read them. The first one is an overview of what happens in King Lear. The second one is an overview of what happens in a play called The Taming of the Shrew. And the final one is taken from Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2. All these scenarios occur in Shakespeare's plays. Read them, please, and answer the question that follows. Take 2 minutes for each. So you've had a good overview there of some really interesting scenarios in Shakespeare, and we've got a good grasp now, I think, about what morality might mean. We're going to think now about justice and morality, because often the two are interlinked. For the rest of the lesson, we're now going to think about this statement, which I've put on the screen in inverted commas. We're going to assess whether we think it is true, partly true, or whether it's false. So the phrase is, Prospero is justified in his revenge against his brother. On the one hand, we might say yes, his behaviour to create the Tempest and to shipwreck, potentially kill his brother was perfectly acceptable. On the other hand, we're going to say no, it was cruel, he shouldn't have done that, and he should have exacted his revenge in a different, more, legal way, shall we say. But of course, there's no such laws on the island, are there? And there's all this magic flying around as well. So, let's look at some evidence then. We've got some quotes here, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read each of these quotes and decide which you think could be used for or against the statement. So firstly, you need to decide whether you agree or whether you disagree with the statement, Prospero is justified in his revenge against his brother. You then need to find some evidence which backs up your view, which you can use in a P paragraph. Maybe you can challenge yourself to include a counter-argument, which is where you take into account the alternative view, but you use it in your argument to disprove it, and therefore making your argument stronger. You've got 4 examples here. We've got 2 quotes from Prospero, a quote from Miranda, and a quote from Antonio. I'd like you to read the quotes first, and you'll see next to them there's a little summary telling you a little bit about what happens in that quote if you need a bit of assistance with it. Once you've read them all, I want you to decide, firstly, what your view is, secondly, which piece of evidence you're going to use to back up your view. Spend 6 minutes or so reading through and making those decisions. Okay, so now that you've seen some evidence and thought about your own view, I'd like you to use the evidence to construct a key paragraph explaining your view. Maybe, as I said before, you can include a second paragraph that includes a counter-argument or which presents an alternative view. So, let's recap. We're agreeing or disagreeing with the quote. Prospero is justified in his revenge against his brother. You're going to spend 10 minutes making your point, either agreeing or disagreeing, bringing in your evidence, and then explaining why your evidence proves your point. If you want to, you can then write a second paragraph using a counter-argument. If you need a bit of assistance with this, then you might want to look at this example on the next slide, which is also in your booklet. Take 10 minutes to write. Good luck. Okay, Year 9, I hope you enjoyed exploring those ideas of leadership and morality, and I hope you managed to convince your reader that your view, that Prospero was or wasn't justified in his revenge, was the correct view. Thank you very much.